Part 59. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 582. The atmosphere at the banquet suddenly stiffened. Gretel wanted to say something, but couldn't. Biochemical environmental materials, 4 major sinkholes, and environmental pollution control are inherently a loss-making business every year. Why should he let the city lord do this? In other words, what kind of benefit exchange can he provide to let the city lord do this? You can't just rely on interests, relationships, or pressure. That's not how you do things. Viscount Joan rejected Gretel's proposal and instantly regretted his mistake. The so-called youth is full of energy, but if it is not full of energy, it is not called young anymore. Would Master Nordmark be unhappy with such a straightforward rejection? Oops, he should be more tactful. Maybe he should cry a little more? Tell us more about your difficulties. Well, Mr. Master, it's not that I don't want to do this. Those people in the village are also my people. It makes me uncomfortable to see them suffer, but. His round and chubby face wrinkled, and in an instant he changed from a freshly steamed white steamed bun to an 18-pleat bun. Every wrinkle on the eyebrows and facial features is written with the word poor in big words. If the sewage is not discharged directly, what should I do? I have to clean up the water used for washing the mines. If I put the output of the entire mine into it, I'm afraid it won't be enough. If it gets to this point, I might as well not open the mine. Gretel was silent. So this is the difficulty of environmental governance: when the cost of a company's pollution control exceeds the company's total profit, what do you want it to do? Close the factory directly? It is not impossible to shut it down directly. The problem is, who will solve the problems of local people's employment, taxation, and economy? Not to mention this world with extremely low productivity. Even in Gretel's previous life, many places followed the path of pollution first and treatment later. Are the local governments and local people really unaware of the pollution? Poor. Besides, I'm not the one who created the dirty water. That workshop discharged much more dirty water than my mine, right? My place is clean, but his efforts to drain it are of no use. This is true. According to Greet's observation, yellow smoke was billowing around the workshop, and an unknown amount of sulfide alone was emitted. As for lead, zinc, cadmium, the amount of sewage discharged from chemical production is definitely much greater than that from simply washing ore. Lord Chiaoan didn't mention the workshop, but Greet wanted to talk to them. Now that it's brought up, let me ask by the way. Lord Viscount, do you know who owns that workshop? Where are the products sold and what are they used for? City Lord Chiaoan knows this problem well. When Gretel asked, he clapped his fingers and said clearly. That workshop is the property of Viscount Lester in the next county, but I heard that the magician enshrined in their city also has a share. As for the things made, where are they sold? The Viscount stood up, took down a pair of glasses from the treasure rack on the side, and placed them in front of Gretel. Lead ingots, zinc ingots, etc., it's just those places. As for their dyes, I heard that they are sold to the glass workshop controlled by the Mage Tower. Then, these pairs of cups were given to me by them. Greet watched intently. The glass is not unusual, it is clear and transparent, which is normal. The only feature is that the printing on it is more eye-catching. Bright yellow, bright blue, orange-red, fluorescent green. Each color is extremely vivid, and turning it slightly in your hand almost makes you suspect that a rainbow has fallen into the world. Especially the bright yellow color, Greet felt as if he had just seen it a few days ago. He held the cup and twisted it with his thumb. The fingertips were smooth and smooth. Obviously, the print is still on the inside of the cup, not the outside. Can I pour some water in? Greet's heart moved and she asked softly. Viscount Joan laughed. No problem. Master Nordmark, if you like it, these cups will be given to you directly. There is no need to send it. Greet poured half a cup of boiling water into it, covering all the prints, and pushed the cup aside. Then, he spoke softly and discussed with the lord of the city. The sewage from this mine must be treated. I have seen the direction of the water system. The creek coming out of the mountains directly flows into the largest lake in the surrounding area, and the water from Whit Lake irrigates the surrounding area for dozens of miles. Put it there. If you don't care. Having said this, Lord Viscount's expression turned ugly. The fields around Whit Lake are some of the best farmland around, and half of the Viscount's own farm is there. Do you think that the grains, vegetables, beef, and mutton you eat in the future will all be watered by poisonous water? Absolutely not. What should we do? How much will it cost? Otherwise, the mine will not open. He asked a series of questions. Gretel sighed. This is not necessary. Regarding industrial sewage treatment, I have seen them doing similar projects in Nevis before. To put it simply, it is to harden the drainage channels, introduce the wastewater into the plant pool, and use plants to purify it. At this point, he proposed to use cement for hardening. He wrote a letter and asked Master Tower to take it to the council to get authorization to open a workshop. While making money, he demolished the east wall and repaired the west wall. Plants are used to treat sewage. The Natural God Church in Nevis has accumulated technology. You can write to ask and I believe they will be more willing to give it. It will be handed over to the Natural God Church for sewage disposal later. The city lord's mansion only needs to be slightly affixed. Explain everything clearly. Seeing that Viscount Joan nodded repeatedly, it was obvious that he had taken action. Then he took a clean empty cup, picked up the printed glass from before, and poured hot water into it. An identification test took a picture and sure enough, there was cadmium in the water. It's very good. If you drink it for a long time, you won't even know how you died. Gretel raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled. Speaking of which, is that workshop part of Viscount Leicester's Mage Tower? In the afternoon of that day, Greet rode APA for hundreds of miles and rushed directly to Sayre City, where Viscount Leicester was located. After wandering around the city for half a night, I went directly to the Mage Tower outside the city the next day. A person's name, the shadow of a tree. Belton Leeds, the presiding mage of Sayre City Mage Tower, is obviously a regular reader of arcane and magic, and he has seen Gretel's name in the journal. As soon as I heard it was him, I immediately opened the door to welcome him. This Leeds mage is one level higher than Gretel in terms of mage level, but he is 20 years older than him. Having been stationed abroad for a long time, he was extremely enthusiastic when meeting a magician from Nevis like Greet. He personally welcomed them to the gate of the Mage Tower, took them into the VIP room at the top of the tower, seated the guests and hosts, and urged the subordinate mage. Make tea. Bring me the new tea brick. Boil the milk, add sugar cubes, and bring your papers. Gretel. It doesn't have to be like this. The two chatted happily. Greet talked about the latest academic research trends in Nevis, and Master Leeds talked about the local customs and various specialties of Leicester County with great interest. Just when he heard Gretel's request, Master Leeds couldn't help but look embarrassed. Treating sewage is very expensive, and the workshop is afraid that it will lose money. It will affect the performance evaluation of Master Tower and our research funds, which is a big trouble. And to be honest, that workshop is not owned by Master Tower, so I can't do it. Host. Gretel silently pulled out a stack of papers. Looking around, Master Leeds understood and dismissed all the low-level mages. Greet put down the paper and pushed it along the table. Would you like to take a look at this first? He said, turning the paper upside down. When Master Leeds saw the title, he silently took a breath of air. On the harm of cadmium to the human body. The paper is thick and full of pictures and texts. As I flipped through the pages, the contents were shocking: joint pain, bone pain, osteoporosis, liver damage, kidney damage. Existing cases, cadmium exposure history, and the therapeutic effect of detoxification. Cadmium prove the existence of this damage. Master Leeds lowered his head slightly and quickly began to recall whether he had accidentally come into contact with this thing in the process of managing the workshop. After recalling it and confirming that it was not the case, I breathed a sigh of relief and continued reading. Our use of cadmium dyes was long before the discovery of this element. Disperse yellow, a dye that has been widely used in the production of glass, ceramics, and paints so far. When Master Leeds read this, he couldn't help but turn his head slightly and glance at the colorful glass windows. This window is also a product of the glass workshop and has the same origin as those glasses. When glass and ceramic vessels fired with it contain hot water, cadmium may precipitate and be ingested by users. He changed color slightly. Greet sat opposite, observing the words and expressions, and said quietly, "I bought a few glassware from a glass shop in the city. Any printed glassware can release cadmium when soaked in hot water." Sweat broke out slightly on Master Leeds' forehead. Glassware, especially printed glassware, is beyond the reach of ordinary people. The customers are all wealthy families. Let them know that the glasses sold in Mage Tower are poisonous. What do you want? I still have a lot to do in Heartland City. I will not return to Nevis within half a month to a month. I will not submit this paper until I return to Nevis. Gretel answered calmly. During this period of time, the glass workshop should make repairs and recalls, and the glass should be able to be roughly smoothed. Seeing Master Leeds nodding quickly, he suddenly smiled. Also, although I don't understand dyes, but the dye peeling off is most likely due to the temperature of the burning glass. If you increase the temperature, it should be solved. As he said this, he dug through the space bag and took out another pile of paper. Methods for treating smoke from dye workshops, general methods for hardening ditches and plant pools, Elder Irwin's letter of introduction to the elders of the Unitarian Church in this county. The method is there, the budget is there, and the contacts are there. Mage Tower's wishes should also be there. It shouldn't be difficult to promote pollution control in workshops, right? Please subscribe. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please vote for recommendation. Please review the book. Asking for all kinds of things. From today to January 7th, it is double time for monthly tickets. From 2000 hours to 2400 hours in the evening, there will be crowdfunding to reward monthly tickets. Every time everyone's rewards accumulate to 1500 points, there will be 4 monthly tickets. If you have any rewards, please give them away. During this time period. Today I watched The Dragon, which is about grenades afraid of water. I can only say that Dan Lingby is still Dan Lingby, and his writing skills are getting better and better. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 583. So we can finally start teaching, right? Greet drove back and forth from Heartland City to the next county, a round trip of hundreds of miles in 2 days, and finally implemented the initial implementation of the pollution control project in the mining area. Then, he was blocked at the entrance of the hospital by the bald bishop. The bishop had bags under his eyes and his face was filled with resentment. Even the big shining bald head was cast a shadow. When he stood in front of Greet, he saw a huge black mountain, with black clouds surrounding it pressing down. He was entrusted by Greet to coordinate manpower, venues, and patience. Within 2 days, his words were worn out. He finally sorted everything out and was waiting to give free clinic lectures, and then what? Gretel's visit in the mountains. Keep waiting, little Gretel is back, keep waiting, little Gretel is gone again. Let's face it, it's not easy to block him. Greet sneered. He didn't originally intend to do it for so long. Isn't it just that more and more things are done, and the same thing continues? I saw it, but it's impossible to let it go. Okay, we can start, he quickly reassured the bishop. Is the venue ready? Is everyone gathered? On the first day, we will learn the relevant content first and make sure we have mastered it before opening a free clinic. The students have definitely gathered. The bald bishop originally generously donated the Great Hall of the God of War Temple, but the Spring Water Temple refused. The Great Hall of the Spring Water Temple was not big enough to accommodate the priests of the three sects to attend lectures and practice. As for Daism, oh, they don't have any objections, it doesn't matter which venue they go to. Anyway, Daism itself doesn't have a church. So, in the end, the abandoned glorious cathedral was used as a teaching location. It's big enough, spacious enough, with enough tables and chairs, and the transportation is convenient enough. Since the plague, the sanctity of the glorious cathedral has been greatly reduced, and it is regularly used as a venue for fairs, auctions, and large-scale performances. Naturally, the three major churches joined forces and wanted to use it as a classroom without any resistance. And, unceremoniously occupying the central hall, Greet walked to the stage with a smile. Looking left and right, the pastors of the three sects were sitting neatly and clearly distinguished. On the left is the deist priest. Led by Elder Irwin, 13 people from the 14 pastors in the church came. There was also one who was supervising the progress of pollution control, or in other words, watching the villagers mowing the grass and giving them money, and couldn't leave. Among them is the priest of the Ares temple. Led by the bald bishop, 15 priests, 2 priest apprentices, and 5 teenagers undergoing priest training arrived neatly. Further back, there are still 7 or 8 knights sitting. Should they be knights? Or perhaps the warriors who were on the verge of reaching the edge of knighthood were pulled together to listen to the lesson. Seeing their sullen faces and holding their quills as if holding the rafters, Gretel felt a little sorry for them. But, alas, at least blood transfusions or something like that are of great benefit to saving the lives of soldiers, so just listen. As for the Spring Water Temple, High Priest Horner didn't know what he was thinking, but he didn't lead a team anyway. There are 5 or 6 people sitting sparsely on the right side of the hall, which is about 1/3 of the number in other people's homes. Fortunately, Gretel was very happy to see an acquaintance. Priest Donald was the first official healer he saw after traveling through time. With bright blonde hair and a smile on his face, he greeted Gretel happily. I didn't see it when I came here a few days ago. It is said that he was sent down below to preside over the small temple. At this moment, taking advantage of the collective training, he returned to the city and sat solemnly among his colleagues. Gretel smiled back at him and was in a good mood. Looking further back, behind the spring temple, there is a group of mages headed by Master Gearman. It is probably the only place with few people and enough space to sit. But why were you dragged here? You don't know how to heal? Well, here we are. It is still beneficial to learn more about some things, regardless of whether it is a mage or a priest. In fact, I can't tell whether these magics of mine are only for mages or priests. Greet looked around and gave everyone a wide smile. Stand on the podium in the middle, knock on the podium, and raise your voice. Has everyone learned the information that was distributed before? Learned. A sparse response. Some people are full of energy, some people's voices are muffled, and some people just open their mouths and make no sound. No need to ask in detail, you can tell at a glance that he is a scumbag, and he can't learn anything from the information and spell scrolls. Gretel was not surprised. The overall level of spellcasters in Heartland City is not as good as Nevis, not even the county. For example, the level of students and teachers in technical secondary schools in the county can be compared with that of colleges and universities in provincial capitals, and can it be compared with the top 2 in the capital? 1. The advanced mathematics teacher dares to use the standards of the mathematics department to teach students about economics and management. The other requires teachers to conduct collective research and hold meetings. How can we enable higher vocational students whose math score is lower than 80 in the college entrance examination to complete the basic courses of advanced mathematics and pass the exam? He smiled and knocked on the blackboard next to him. Do you really know how to do it? Then let's take a test. Do not. There was a high and low scream. It's only been a few days since the information was distributed. It hasn't arrived in 5 days, right? Is this a test? What happens if you don't do well in the exam? Kicked out of class? No lessons? What would the big guys in the temple think of me? Will his evaluation be lowered? There will be no chance of promotion this year, and he will not be able to go out and preside over the local temple? Woohoo, if I had known I would have an exam today, I wouldn't have gone out drinking last night. Gretel pinched his ears, automatically blocking out the screams. He patted the space bag, pulled out a thick stack of papers, counted a few pictures, and then moved to the next one, counted a few more pictures, and then moved to the next one. Pass it on. Pass it on. Pass it on. The priests, and even the soldiers, all looked sad. Pastor Donald was sitting in the back. Before he got the paper, he had already shouted, "I haven't finished learning yet. There are so many spells, but I've only learned one so far. It doesn't matter if you haven't learned the spell. The test this time is just theory, and it doesn't count. It's just to see everyone's mastery, so I know what to say next." Gretel raised his hand with a smile. Seeing that the person in front of him refused to pass the paper down, he pointed his hand and the invisible servant flew out, holding the paper and flying around. One person dropped a piece on his head and covered it directly on his forehead. Do. Oh, it feels so good to be a teacher. I can give them papers and watch them write the papers desperately, and you don't have to correct the papers. The priests, as well as the warriors, began to do it with mournful faces. Whispering and whispering. How many blood types do humans have? Which blood vessel should be used for blood transfusion? Is it an artery or a vein? What should we pay attention to in blood transfusion? Is it so troublesome? Lend me your paper to look at. What are the electrocardiogram detection points? Why do you have to write them in groups? On the difference between detection magic and ultrasonic magic detecting objects? What is the difference? Gretel turned a blind eye. Just copy. For those who have not learned yet, copying papers can also be considered as consolidating memory. He walked down row by row, from the front row to the back row, from left to right, coughing from time to time and knocking on someone's table. This question is wrong. That's not what this question is about. Why don't you hand the paper back? Are you copying it in front of me? All in all, those who are familiar with Gretel and have worked in the treatment center seem to be doing relatively well. It's basically full, and the accuracy rate is pretty good. At a glance, it's over 60%. For example, Pastor Anthony and Pastor Joanna of the Natural Deism, such as Pastor Patrick and Little John of the Aries Temple, and Pastor Donald of the Fountain Temple. As for Elder Irwin and Bald Bishop, the accuracy rate is even higher. This level is definitely not good for medical students, but among the crooked melons and cracked jujubes in this place, it is already considered good to be the tallest among the dwarfs. What surprised Greed was that Master Gearman and the others from the Mage Tower had an accuracy rate of over 80%. Have you finished? Stop writing when you are done. Let's check the correct answer. First, the first question, the types of blood types. Silent phantom. A large area of light and shadow appears. Anyone who could read without difficulty started copying notes for their own answers. Greed was chattering beside him. If you transfuse the wrong blood type, the probability of death is very high. If you transfuse the correct blood type and do not follow the blood transfusion operating regulations, you will either die on the spot during the process, or you will die of infection after the transfusion. You don't want to die, and you don't want the person being treated to die, right? Then remember it. The blood collection needles must be disinfected. The blood transfusion pipes must be disinfected. If vines are used to temporarily create blood transfusion channels, the vines must first be soaked in disinfectant water and used as needed. The blood transfusion speed cannot be too fast, the temperature should not be too low. Blood transfusion must be done through veins. Arteries are where the heart pumps blood out. If you pump blood in, it will easily get sprayed in your face. Detection magic mainly looks at bones and heart and lungs, ultrasound magic mainly looks at internal organs, and if you are careful, you can also look at blood vessels. If you still can't remember clearly, just remember detection magic looks at hard things and gases, ultrasound magic looks soft. Have you written it all down? Once you've written it down, let's start with the practical exercises. First, learn how to raise your hands to detect magic. Raise your hands. This spell is a level 0 trick, and the caster is basically everyone. Greet nodded with satisfaction. This magic mainly depends on the practical operation. Just go back and memorize the posture. Next, learn how to raise your hands in the electrocardiogram magic. There was a sound of brushing, and all the horses were silent. Including Elder Irwin, Bald Bishop, and Master Gearman, the top spellcasters in Heartland City, each one of them was wiped out. Well, this won't work. Electrocardiogram has irreplaceable advantages in diagnosing emergencies such as myocardial infarction. Before he left, he had to teach at least one person. So where are you all stuck? Please subscribe. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please vote for recommendation. Please review the book. Asking for all kinds of things. From today to January 7th, it is double time for monthly tickets. From 2000 hours to 2400 hours in the evening, there will be crowdfunding to reward monthly tickets. Every time everyone's rewards accumulate to 1500 points, there will be 4 monthly tickets. If you have any rewards, please give them away during this time period. Thanks to @bookfriend 201912100012000650 for the reward of 1500 starting coins. Cold.jpg. Uncomfortable. I don't want to write, I want to sleep. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 584. Gretel was very depressed. Gretel was just a little bit cranky. Gretel began to doubt life. Isn't it just a B ultrasound? Isn't it just an electrocardiogram? Isn't it just a blood test? Isn't it just a bunch of capped level 1 magics, some of which are still magic level magics? Why can't you learn? He didn't find it difficult when he was teaching those students in Nevis and the necromancer who was attacking him in the hospital. Throw the spell model out and talk about a few reference magics. After the students practice it a few times, they will naturally know it. Then, as long as one person knows it, it will be passed from person to person, and self-reproduction. There is no need for him to bother to teach, he can master everything just by brushing. But what about here? I won't talk about the first and second level spellcasters. Some are third, fourth, and even fifth level. In 4 or 5 days, you can't even learn a basic magic? Gretel thought about it and felt that his requirements for students might be too harsh. He discussed with several leaders and divided the spellcasters into 4 groups. 1 set of B ultrasound, 1 set of electrocardiogram, one set of blood tests, and one set of blood pressure. According to the previous learning progress, you can sign up voluntarily and combine freely. Well, of course, Gretel doesn't care about how the big bosses in each sect are assigned. After the assignment, take a short break. The service staff brought in a large number of experimental animals and distributed them to each group of spellcasters according to the spells they learned. Some are sheep, some are rabbits, some are dogs. Well, anyway, the God of War Temple is responsible for most of the costs, and the Spring Water Temple is responsible for a small part of the costs. As for the deism, greed belongs to their family. It's reasonable to use teaching funds without any regrets. After the experimental animals were distributed, Greed began to teach groups one by one. The first is the B ultrasound group. This magic, Greed thinks, is the simplest. The basics are ready-made magic, just make slight changes. The students at Nevis Hospital killed a dozen rabbits per person, and they could basically see the internal organs clearly. Of course, reading movies or something like that is another matter. But what about Heartland City? I've been posting the information for several days, but no one understands it. None. Isn't it possible to use sound wave detection? Have you never learned echo detection? I haven't learned anything. Led by Pastor Anthony, a group of healers shook their heads in unison. Okay, as a priest, not a magician, the learning path and skill points may be different to begin with. Gretel pressed his forehead, turned his head, and looked at Master Karen. In 3 years, Master Karen advanced from level 3 to level 4. According to Master Herman's evaluation, it was quite satisfactory. For a 4th level mage, it's not that difficult to learn ultrasonic magic, right? Master Karen silently raised a hand. I have learned echo detection, but I can't detect it inside the body. I have practiced it for several days and it still doesn't work. Oh, this Gretel knows what the problem is. He dragged across the blackboard, picked up a piece of chalk with a mage's hand, and drew spell configurations on it. Look, there is a function curve here, it goes like this. You can control the frequency of ultrasonic waves by adjusting this value when you release the spell. Configurations, curves, algorithms. From top to bottom, from left to right, I wrote on the blackboard and turned around. Understood. As far as the eye can see, Master Karen's head is struggling up and down at the speed of a chicken pecking rice. Look at the blackboard, copy 2 words, look at the blackboard again, and copy 2 words. Seeing the speed of his nodding, Greed felt that something was not good. Don't you even know the formula? I walked over and took a look again, it was over and I really didn't recognize it. I've only copied half of the formula, and I've already missed 2 symbols. You need to change it here, this symbol needs to be written on it. Greed stared at him as he finished correcting his notes. As for explaining the formula, it cannot be done in a short while, so I have to move it later. Forget it, you first learn echo detection from Master Karen, and then slowly practice it with animals. When you can see the internal organs clearly, and the animals stop vomiting blood, you can then look at people according to the picture book. Greed shook his head and sighed, switching to the blood test team. In the blood test team, the bald bishop personally took charge and recruited a group of soldiers to work as coolies for him. Greed welcomes this. Soldiers on the battlefield have a higher probability of needing blood transfusions than ordinary people. Even if warriors can't learn magic, they can at least know what they can do when they need a blood transfusion. However, the problem is that from the first step of blood collection, there are many problems. Disinfect. Disinfect. You should disinfect it after all. Your big arms are covered in mud, can you rub them clean first? Don't poke the needle randomly. Just poke it to about the same depth, and keep the angle straight. Oops, are both ends pierced? Just let it sit for a while. If you want to separate the serum quickly, you can go to the centrifuge. Wait, What is your centrifugation method? A strong man shakes it hard. Press the gourd and lift it up. Gretel had no other choice but to distribute a set of syringes to each of them and let them practice on animals. The rabbit is too small, the dog is too powerful, and the cow is too big. So, get some sheep and give each person a leg of lamb. Gretel was so tired that after teaching him once, his tongue was about to stick out. This is not over yet. After teaching blood collection, we need to teach them cross-matching. After teaching cross-matching, we also need to teach them blood testing magic. It's just a simplified version of Distinguish Bloodline. Have you learned Distinguish Bloodline? I learned it, but forget it. Even if you can't learn the blood test magic, you can still make do with cross-matching blood. However, the problem is that when it comes to cross-matching, they are even more outrageous. Dilute it first. Dilute it. Dilute it and then drip it in. When taking red blood cells, immerse them at the bottom of the serum. Don't suck up the serum together. Don't shake your hands. Don't shake. Don't touch the wall of the test tube. Hey, why are you poking so hard? It's the first time I've seen a man who poked the bottom of a test tube. Teaching these students, it feels like their blood pressure has risen by dozens of millimeters of mercury. Gretel reluctantly led them through the process, staring at the bald bishop writing down every detail of the process, sighing, and headed to the next group. EKG group. This group has the biggest problems. Master Gearman, Master Elliot, and several higher-level priests all looked at each other in this group. Seeing Gretel coming, Master Elliot rushed towards him as if he saw a savior. Greet. How do you do this electrocardiogram? Why does the cloud screen light up? Why do lines appear? When Master Elliot first met Gretel, he was already a level 2 mage. During the dysentery epidemic, thanks to Greet, he used a microscope to glimpse the microscopic world and advanced to a level 3 mage. The relationship between the two has always been good. So far, Elliot has been stuck at the transition from level 4 to level 5 for 2 years. So Gretel started talking about new magic, and he immediately ran over excitedly. Maybe if you learn something, you can draw parallels? Can we cross this threshold? Even if not, spending 10 days and a half to learn a few new spells is not a loss. He looked at Gretel eagerly, waiting for his answer. Gretel shook off his sweat. Can I tell you that I still haven't figured it out yet? We can only guess that this cloud screen has a mechanism similar to the cloud chamber in the front room. When high energy particles pass through, there will naturally be fluctuations. Or, can I tell you that this magic was changed by the dragon clan for me? Just follow this and release it, he replied bravely. Not every spell knows its reason. Do you know the principle of all the spells you have learned? Oh. Mage Elliot wilted instantly. Memorizing by rote is the most annoying thing. Excluding the principle of magic, there was one more thing he couldn't figure out. And this is also the biggest obstacle that prevents him from releasing the electrocardiogram spell. Why is there so much clutter in the cloud screen I released? The lines are so messed up that I can't even see them. Gretel couldn't answer this, so he could only let him release one and have a look. A soldier next to him was recruited to be the target of the spell, and his upper body was exposed so that he could find a spot. Master Elliot held his breath and lowered his head one by one. Look. Greet held his forehead. To be honest, he had never seen such a messy electrocardiogram. The P wave was not a P wave, and the T wave was not a T wave. It was all crooked and twisted, like a ball of wool that a cat had played with. He released his mental energy and felt it for a long time, but he couldn't figure it out. Suddenly, I had an idea and took an electrocardiogram on Master Elliot and compared the two sides. You, let yourself go. Your own mental power is just a carrier. Don't impose your own thoughts on the spell. I let it go, and the cloud screen collapsed. Master Elliot stammered. Gretel didn't even think about it. He raised his hand and a mechanized mind hit him on the face. Look, isn't this okay? The lines of the cloud screen instantly became regular. Just as Gretel was about to explain, the group on the right suddenly screamed. Ah! What's the situation? Greed turned his head and suddenly felt his blood pressure explode, and blood burst through the Tianling cap. As far as the eye can see, there is a fountain of blood on the right side of the hall, which is really spraying on the ceiling. What are you doing? Gretel flew away. When I squeezed into the crowd and took a look, I suddenly became furious. 5 or 6 priests gathered around a goat, scrambling around, throwing healing spells around, but they couldn't stop the blood gurgling from its neck. There was a needle lying on the table next to me. From the needle, the syringe, to the mercury column next to me, it sprayed bright red. Hold the artery. Hold it first. Greed rushed forward and touched the goat's neck, found the proximal end of the artery, pressed it accurately, and cast the healing technique. This time, just a basic minimally invasive treatment stopped the blood flow on the goat's neck. When doing invasive blood pressure monitoring, you need to press the proximal end of the blood pressure monitor first before removing it. Press it first and then remove it. You dare to play with the arteries even if you are not familiar with the basic operation. You are truly the worst class I have ever led. You have all kinds of problems, and you can make any kind of trouble for me. Please subscribe. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please vote for recommendation. Please review the book. Asking for all kinds of things. From today to January 7th, the last 3 days will be double monthly pastime. From 2000 hours to 2400 hours in the evening, there will be crowdfunding to reward monthly passes. Every time everyone's rewards accumulate to 1500 points, there will be 4 monthly passes. Please ask for rewards. Put it in this time period. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Lan 2020. Chapter 585. Greed ran around, so tired that his tongue stuck out, and finally sadly realized a fact. The foundation of his students is too poor, and they are completely incomparable with the magicians in Nevis. It looks like they may all be third-level spellcasters. One is a third-level caster who has learned all the relevant spells, and the other is a third-level caster who has only learned 3 or 5 spells and has a complete mess of theoretical skills. If he wanted to teach them these basic skills, he would have to spend more time and a lot more patience. Then grow in practice. Greed let out a breath and changed course. Except for those in the ultrasound group who continued to torture the animals with ultrasound, and those in the invasive blood pressure group who continued to poke rabbit arteries, sheep arteries, and dog arteries, the other 2 groups all went to clinical practice with him. On the first day, blood tests were conducted on all city guards, and priests were trained to practice cross-matching. The next day, blood tests were conducted on all members of the armed forces of the God of War Temple and the City Lord's Mansion, and priests were trained to practice cross-blood matching. On the third day, blood tests were conducted on the Spring Temple and the private soldiers of various lords outside the city. After 3 days, at least the priests who helped him with the 2 things of blood collection and cross-matching were no longer stumbling and blundering. As for the blood test magic, Elder Irwin and the bald bishop have both mastered it. Greed finally decided to advance clinical work to the next step. Open a free clinic to treat residents. Anyway, even if these priests are not very good, they still have healing skills. Greed has rich experience in sending doctors to the countryside and so on. However, the free clinic work this time was very different from the free clinic work he was used to in his previous life. The stethoscope, sphygmomanometer, and electrocardiogram are the 3 major items. Gretel's own stethoscope is a Y-shaped vine, with one end hardening to form a chest piece and 2 ends growing into ear pieces. When inserted into the ear, the outside of the vine is still a bit hairy. Other people's stethoscopes, the priests of the Natural God Church, basically maintain the same standard as him. At the temple of the god of war, each person carried a copper pipe, which looked more like a street fight than sending a doctor to the countryside. There were no sphygmomanometers at all, and using an invasive sphygmomanometer during the physical examination was too much in Greet's opinion. Currently, the only human ECG machines are him and Master Herman, and the only reader is Gretel. What? B ultrasound. Human flesh B ultrasound machine and human flesh examination doctor, Gretel Nordmark, this is the only one, there is no other semicolon. Then go to. Gretel encouraged himself secretly. He put on a smile and looked at the first old man who sat in front of him. Grandpa Johnny, what's wrong with you? Chest tightness. The old man turned his face away, coughed a few times, put his palms against his sides and quietly put them into his pockets. Gretel's eyes narrowed, and he immediately rushed over to hold his hand. What's wrong? There was a ball of blood in the palm of my hand. Beside the old man, a middle-aged man exclaimed. Father! It's okay, the old man coughed a few more times, it's just a little bit of blood, it doesn't matter. Most of the time, I vomit bowl after bowl of blood. It's not like you haven't seen it before. Tuberculosis. The word suddenly came to Gretel's mind. Taking X-ray and auscultation together, it does feel a bit like tuberculosis, but not quite like it. The bald bishop on the side. Johnny is also an old patient of ours. He suffers from consumptive disease several times every summer and winter. Sometimes he vomits blood and sometimes he doesn't. I've also treated him, but he can't get rid of it. Little Greet, look at it. Let me see, you stay away first. Don't stand directly opposite him. Tuberculosis is contagious. Greet himself was not afraid. Masks and bubble techniques are always available, so any infection cannot reach him. He auscultated, X-rayed, examined each patient one by one, and took the patient's sputum for culture. While throwing bacterial growth technique into the petri dish, he chatted with the bald bishop. Mr. Bishop, were you treated for tuberculosis before? Yes. How to cure it? I used disease removal once, and it was relieved at the time, but then it relapsed. His family had no money and couldn't afford the magic, so he just took medicine. To be honest, taking medicine and various herbal medicines are of some use, at least they are useful in eliminating phlegm, reducing phlegm, and helping coughs. However, after culturing the bacteria, fixing, staining, and microscopic examination, Greet frowned deeply. No tubercle bacilli. If it was tuberculosis, even if streptomycin hadn't been developed yet, he could ask Elder Irwin to use targeted killing of bacteria to clear the tubercle bacilli from the lungs. But without Mycobacterium tuberculosis, this is a bit troublesome. Gretel calmed down and asked about the medical history again. Fever, occasionally, high fever and low fever, unclear, when the body temperature is highest, unclear. Chest tightness, chest pain, and blood in the sputum. I coughed up a lot of blood once in the past 2 years. What have you done before? I have done everything, collecting firewood, burning charcoal, and burning kills. In order to make money, country people have to do any kind of work. Greet heard burning charcoal and burning kill and already had a guess in his mind. He asked the old man to lie down in the hospital's consulting room, then turned to face the bald bishop and the old man's son, Tang En, a soldier of the city guard. This old man probably doesn't have tuberculosis. As for the reason why he vomited blood, I suspect that there was too much dust in his lungs from burning charcoal and kills in his early years. What? How to prove it? Then how to cure it? The bald bishop and Tang En asked at the same time. Greet is confident. The proof is very simple. Use a vine to send the secret eye into the lungs and take a look. As for treatment, one is to wash the lungs, and the other is, seeing as the old man vomits so much blood, there may be calcification embedded in the bronchus, just take it out. Tang An turned to look at his father, then at the bald bishop, doubtful. Greet smiled slightly. I have performed hundreds of lung cleaning operations in the Dwarf Kingdom, and everyone survived. If you believe me, I will treat the elderly. Really? Treat me? The old man suddenly let out a low roar. Immediately afterwards, there was another violent cough, and Greet rushed over in panic, caressing the old man's chest and patting his back. It took a while for old Johnny to recover, and he held Gretel's wrist tightly, his beard and hair twitching. Live if you have a life, or die if you don't. We watched little Greet grow up. This child has a kind heart and will not harm me. Let him come. The patient himself was firm in his intention, and Gretel did not hesitate. The electric oxygen concentrator starts up, spawns vines, performs one lung ventilation, fills and pumps water. This series of movements has been practiced thousands of times in the Dwarf Kingdom, and it has become very familiar here. Black and grey dirty water gurgled out of his lungs, and the priests who were watching were stunned. The lungs are so dirty. Can the lungs of a living person be cleaned? Wash the lungs, use vines to bite the surrounding tissue, remove the calcifications in the bronchial tubes, and then the treatment will be completed. The old man opened his eyes and took a few breaths. Phew, much better. Little Gretel, Mage Nordmark, your healing skills are really amazing. Tang An rushed over to support his old father. The two of them walked slowly out of the consulting room, one on the left and the other on the right. Another ant immediately came up to her. Little, Mage Nordmark, my hand is very wooden recently, can you take a look at it? Please subscribe. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please vote for recommendation. Please review the book. Asking for all kinds of things. Double time on the last day, please vote. Thank you for the 1666 rating points of this show's real show. My cold is not completely gone yet. I am still coughing, sneezing, and have a runny nose today. I will only write 4,000 words today. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Lan 2020. Chapter 586. A woman in her 40s. He has a strong body, a ruddy face and a loud voice. Numbness in the hand. So, what is numbness? Tenosynovitis. Carpal tunnel syndrome. Or is it caused by cervical bone hyperplasia and compression? Gretel smiled and asked her to sit down and look down. When his eyes fell, his pupils shrank instantly. The entire hand was swollen like a carrot, and the skin on the 5 fingers of the right hand was tight, shiny, and purple. There was a large area of abnormal waxy white on the back of the palm, with a large number of blood-type blisters on it, which looked shiny at first glance. The edge is bluish-purple, extending from the back of the palm to the wrist, outlining an equilateral triangle. This hand. Gretel felt bad intuitively. He maintained a calm smile and spoke in a relaxed tone. Aunt Rita, what's wrong with your hands? When did you start to feel numb? How many days has it been? Do you have any other discomforts? Hi, the woman waved her hand nonchalantly. Gretel, who was sitting opposite her, could see a hint of deeply hidden nervousness in her smile. I'm usually in great health. Everywhere in the house, inside and out, there are a few old men and 2 little grandsons. I can't take care of anyone. It's just this hand. I stabbed it when I was killing fish the day before yesterday. It's actually swollen like this today. Look, look. History of trauma. Gretel secretly noted it down and asked patiently. How many days has this hand been hurting? 2 days. It was a bit swollen and painful yesterday. I applied some medicine myself and it seemed to be a little better, the woman talked gushingly. It turned out that the pain was severe at night. Thinking about it being late at night, I didn't want to bother anyone at this time. Besides, the temple doesn't accept patients at night. It's okay today, it doesn't hurt much. Severe swelling from fingers to wrist. Large areas of blue and purple. From severe pain to not much pain. This is not a good sign. Gretel would rather her hand still hurt, it still hurt, which meant that the inflammatory reaction was still going on and the body was still alive. He reached out and pinched the woman's fingertips. Does it hurt? It doesn't hurt. I don't feel anything at all. Aunt Rita shouted louder and louder. To either side of Gretel, at several square tables lined up for free clinics, there were priests looking back. Greet smiled at them, took out the smallest syringe, and pointed at the veins on the back of the woman's hand. "Aunt, can I draw a little blood from your hand to see if it's okay? Your hand is a bit swollen. Drawing some blood will make it easier to figure out what's going on. If you can, put your palm flat here, don't move. Don't worry, it won't hurt. Hey, you little guy. If you smoke it casually, is Auntie still afraid of pain?" The woman answered very readily. Gretel forced a smile at her, held her fingertips, and gently inserted the needle into the vein on the back of her palm. Penetrating, withdrawing, needle point. No blood. Gretel's scalp suddenly exploded. There is no blood in the dorsal palmar vein, which means that the underlying tissue is about to die, or even has begun to die. Can these fingers, or even this palm, be saved? He stood up immediately. He took the woman's hand and gently but firmly invited her to the operating room. "Aunt, your hand is in trouble. You need to look inside. Come with me. By the way, are your family nearby? It's best to ask them to come over. It's better for your husband to come over." "My old man? He should be patrolling the city today. Should I call him over?" "Don't. I'll ask someone to call you." The woman followed him in confusion. While Gretel was pulling people inside, he called over the nearest priest apprentice and said in a quick voice, "Please come here, teacher. Please come here, the bishop. Please come here with her family. Hurry." As he said that, he had already placed the person into the operating room. "Delay pain, throw it away, tie the tourniquet, and discharge a row of instruments beside the operating table." The silver light was shining and the air conditioning was strong. The woman immediately became nervous. "Little, Mage Nordmark, what's wrong? What's wrong with my hand? Aunt Rita, please don't worry." Greet tried to persuade her as gently as possible. When he touched her forehead with his palm, as expected, the temperature was quite high. Gretel took out a thermometer without thinking. "Put it in your mouth and press it under your tongue. Yes, that's it. Hold it with your lips, don't bite it with your teeth. Hey, someone, help me watch her. After 5 minutes, take it out and read the reading. I'll go brush my hands." 5 minutes later, the report showed that the patient's temperature was as high as 39.2 degrees and the infection was obvious. Greet returned in a hurry and started the operation. The skin on the back of the palm was cut open, and a familiar stench hit his nostrils. Greet sniffed and immediately had an ominous premonition. Oops! Don't run into an old friend with this taste. When the skin flap was opened, a large amount of necrotic fat was seen in the lower part. When it was cut further down, a large amount of dishwater-like pus appeared in the superficial facial plane of the necrotic tissue. When the aponeurosis was incised, the dorsal metacarpal artery was slightly touched, and there was almost no elasticity. Greet became more and more worried. He cut the dorsal palmar artery, and a dark bruise slowly flowed along with a small amount of blood. Even the arteries are almost blocked. It looks like necrotizing fasciitis. This disease has an acute onset and rapid onset. Moreover, The patient was delayed for 3 days. Never have diabetes, never have diabetes, never have diabetes. Gretel prayed repeatedly in her heart. He took a small tube of blood from the woman's radial vein and let the snake taste it. The little snake pounced in. After a moment, it raised its head and reported back. "It's so sweet. This blood is so sweet. It's over, I really have diabetes, combined with necrotizing fasciitis." Gretel's eyes darkened. When diabetes and necrotizing fasciitis are combined, they are particularly prone to attacks, particularly difficult to heal, and particularly prone to recurrence. Diabetic foot has always been one of the difficulties in surgical wound repair. What's more, the structure of the hand is dense and complex, and it is more difficult to retain function than the foot. Can this hand be saved? Just as he was thinking about it, the door of the operating room opened, and Elder Irwin and the bald bishop came together. Their eyes fell on the hand at the same time, they were slightly startled, and looked at each other. This hand has almost no life left. The bald bishop spoke quickly and yelled out. The woman's whole body was shocked. "What? This hand may need to be amputated," Gretel interrupted with a stern face. "Master Bishop, please go and explain to Aunt Rita's husband. I will try my best to save this hand, but if I can't save it, for the sake of life, I will have to amputate it in the end." Of course, the premise is that they agree. What? Do you want to chop off this hand? The woman's face suddenly turned pale. His right hand subconsciously retracted, and his left hand covered it, as if to protect the palm that was about to be lost. "Little Gretel! Hands down!" Gretel yelled out faster than she did. With a finger, 2 vines flew out and tied her left arm tightly to her side. "Aunt Rita, I know it's painful and inconvenient to lose a hand, and I will try my best to save it, but if you can't save it and a dead hand is attached to your body, you will die. Please subscribe. Asking for a monthly ticket. Please vote for recommendation. Please review the book. Asking for all kinds of things. Double time on the last day, please vote. In the last 4 hours of crowdfunding, please give me a reward. P.S. The fever has not gone away today, a low fever of 37.3 degrees, I will push it all day long, 24 hours, on January 9th, the day after tomorrow. I am working hard to compile the manuscript. I will pay back all the rewards and updates I owe you. Thanks to Ed for the 500 starting coins. P.S. Necrotizing fasciitis is really, really dangerous, especially diabetes combined with necrotizing fasciitis. Don't take it seriously just because you have a small cut on your hand, foot, or other part. If you feel something is wrong, you must seek medical treatment in time. According to the information I found, the fatality rate is as high as 20.8%, and 29.2% of patients have had their limbs amputated. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Lan 2020. Chapter 587. The woman's face was pale, and her body was leaning against the operating table, about to collapse. Gretel sighed secretly, and was about to continue to persuade politely, when a green light fell without warning, controlling the person in place, unable to speak or move. It was Elder Irwin who took action. The third level of natural soothing is similar to the tranquility technique of the Temple of the God of War, and its effect is slightly equivalent to general anesthesia. "Little Gretel, hurry up and work first," Elder Irwin said in a cold voice. "Whether you can save it or not, you have to work hard first before you can tell. This hand is so rotten. If you do it later, your hope will be reduced. Don't spend time chatting with her. Doesn't this require talking, informing, and obtaining consent before surgery? Gretel smiled bitterly. After being in this world for so long, he is still not used to the laws of this world. What is medical ethics? What are patients' rights to informed consent? For the patient, the healer and the spellcaster have one identity in heaven and the other on earth. It would be great if you are willing to treat you, but you still have to spend all your time convincing me. Dream. Teacher, please tell the bishop that if the amputation is really necessary, her husband must agree. He lowered his head to clean the wound. While working, I was still thinking. It's best if they both agree. Don't force, don't yell at them. Your hands are on your body, your life is yours, you have to agree. I know, Elder Irwin replied angrily. He opened the door and went out and yelled a few words. After all, he was still worried about his disciple, so he came back. Standing on the edge, looking at the bloody hand, he frowned and said, "Can I help you in any way? Do you want to release the healing spell?" "No need for now." Gretel's eyes were heavy. He pointed at Aunt Rita's abdomen. "Teacher, do you know the location of the pancreas? Treat the pancreas and let her blood sugar drop at least a little bit." How was insulin extracted from the pancreas in the first place? What reagents are used, what steps are used, and what reaction methods are used? Greet had no idea. The only thing he knew was that not many years later, the Chinese were the first to artificially synthesize insulin. However, it is definitely not a good idea to directly mash the pancreas and inject it into the human body. It will definitely cause trouble. In desperation, he had no choice but to save the country by asking Elder Irwin to directly use the treatment technique to take care of the patient's pancreas. Well, diabetes is caused by problems with the pancreas, and treating the pancreas will definitely be good for blood sugar, so that's the decision. He lowered his head, and the mage's hand and scalpel flew up and down together, continuing to debridement. This process, to outsiders, is particularly hideous and terrifying. Drop by drop, the liquefied fat is washed away by the saline solution and falls into the basin below. The whitish, discolored, and necrotic superficial fascia was cut off without mercy. Under the necrotic skin, the deep fascia is torn open, the pus is sucked out, and put aside to wait for bacterial culture. Muscles, tendons, blood vessels, and all tissues that have lost their vitality and elasticity are all cleaned up. Not long after, the white bones on the four fingers except the thumb, the back, and center of the palm were visible. Gretel took a deep breath, turned his head, and raised his voice. "Cyrilla! Cyrilla! Coming!" Miss Silverdragon appeared quickly. Greet raised his right hand, circled his thumb and index finger, and made a gesture in front of his eyes. "Celera, bring me a magnifying glass. It's the one I used to connect my arm last time, 6 times the size." "Okay." The silver dragon girl waved her hand, and the fluorescent light flashed. In front of Greet, the palm that had almost been cut off in half was immediately enlarged 6 times. The next task will be even more difficult. Gretel closed his eyes silently. Debridement, debridement, must remove all necrotic tissue, but also retain enough viable tissue. Especially Aunt Rita's hand, there is very little tissue left. If more normal tissue is not retained, even if the debridement is successful, it will be difficult to grow back. Under the 6-fold magnification, Greet operated with great care and at an almost minimally invasive level. The scalpel passed quietly along the dividing line between necrotic tissue and normal tissue. One piece, another trace. Looking from the direction of Elder Irwin and Sarah, the extent of the sinking of the blade between Gretel's last cut and the next cut was so small that it was almost invisible. Sarah was curious, so she made a gesture of holding a knife, hovering in the air, and within 2 seconds, her fingertips could be seen moving up and down on the ground. So difficult. The silver dragon girl secretly stuck out her tongue. Greet suddenly became hoarse and tilted his head slightly. "Wipe the sweat. Sarala quickly flew out a mage's hand and wiped the sweat off his forehead. Gretel closed his eyes briefly and sighed secretly. Why is it that even though he has a beautiful silver dragon girl, there is still no one to wipe his sweat, and only a mage's hand flies over? The hand of the mage is really not a good thing. Just when I thought of this, there was a sudden commotion outside the operating room. 3 or 5 men shouted at the top of their lungs. Among them, a low and anxious voice shouted particularly loudly. "Rita! Rita! Let me in! How is she? Why did you cut off the hand?" Gretel quickly looked to the right side of the operating table. Aunt Rita was lying on the operating table, still looking like she was controlled by a spell, unable to speak or move, but her pupils were wide open, obviously very excited. "Don't. Blood pressure will be high." Greet sighed and had no choice but to perform a soothing spell, hoping that she would calm down. "Alas, there is no test and comparison, so I don't know whether the effect is good or not. Calm down. We're doing surgery inside." The only one with a louder voice than him was the bald bishop. Listening to the collision of bodies outside, it seems that the bald bishop is driving out all the patient's family members one against several. Of course, with the strength of high-level warriors and high-level spellcasters, it is easy to do this. The room outside the operating room soon became quiet. Gretel breathed a sigh of relief and continued to work hard. Dorsal palmar artery, dorsal digital artery, branches of ulnar nerve, branches of median nerve, branches of radial nerve, muscles, tendons. If you can keep a little, keep a little, if you can live a little more, live a little more. Suddenly, there were footsteps approaching quickly from outside. The thin wooden door of the operating room was hammered loudly. Fortunately, the visitor had no intention of opening the door. After banging on the door a few times, he shouted at the top of his lungs outside. "Rita! Don't be afraid, Rita. Let's listen to the priests. If they say you can keep it, keep it, if they say you want to cut it off, cut it off. Don't be afraid. Survive. If your hand is broken, I will support you for the rest of your life. I will support you for the rest of my life." On the operating table, the woman was lying on her back, staring at the top of her head, her eyes sparkling. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. It doesn't matter if you don't have anything else, just give me a few more recommendation votes. Thanks to @origami, gart, and @ridingpigtiger for the 3,000 starting coins. Thanks to @bookfriend 2018118164346291 for the reward of 100 starting coins. Thanks to @zuan for the 100 book coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 588. Rinse with normal saline. Thorough debridement. Rinse repeatedly with saline solution. Holy water rinse. Well, it doesn't matter whether it is aerobic bacteria, anaerobic bacteria, streptococcus, staphylococcus, marine vibrio vulnificus, mycobacterium marinum. Saline saline and holy water can replace hydrogen peroxide and complex iodine and kill all germs that should not exist. By the way, teacher, you can do some bacterial culture and microscopy to see what bacteria are in the pus, and use treatment to brush her, or just use remove disease directly. Greet was rinsing and discussing without raising his head. Elder Irwin hummed, took the pus Greet had reserved in advance, and went to tinker with it. Dip it with a sterilization ring, put it into different types of culture media, and release the birth-inducing spell. After completing the process, most of the bacterial colonies on the culture medium were completely eliminated and the bacteria survived. In only one petri dish with physiological saline added, the bacteria grew vigorously and healthily. Elder Irwin put it under the microscope and looked left and right. Looking up and down, he saw that it looked completely different from any of the pathogenic bacteria that Greet had mentioned in his previous letter. Little Gretel, come and see, which one is the pathogenic bacteria. If he wasn't sure, he wouldn't dare use the healing technique. Killing indiscriminately, the effect is terrible. Absolutely no random attempts. Elder Irwin once practiced his skills and used his mental power to lock onto a round and flat bacteria and kill them all. Then there was nothing more. The rabbit he used as a test subject kicked his legs and fell down. In less than a minute, he completely lost his breath, and no treatment could save him. Later, when I wrote to Greet, I found out that what he killed that time was not the bacteria, but the red blood cells in the blood, which carry oxygen and nutrients. Greet stopped temporarily, raised his two palms to the mirror, and observed carefully. While watching, he lowered his voice and muttered in a low voice. Staphylococcus aureus, not. Pseudomonas aeruginosa, not either. Streptococcus, not either. This thing doesn't look like bacilli, but like Vibrio. Let me think about what kind of Vibrios there are in the wound. Vibrio cholerae, is not. Vibrio parahemolyticus, the colonies look different. Vibrio vulnificus, yes, it is Vibrio vulnificus. Marine Vibrio vulnificus. Teacher, come and see this. Which one? That's it? The short one, a little bit curved, a little bit to the upper left corner in the middle, the one with the most typical appearance. Gretel was talking and gesticulating, and there was a trickle of sweat on his forehead, but Elder Irwin's eyes remained blank. Gretel was depressed. How to explain it clearly? How to point it out to him? If it's Staphylococcus aureus, then it's a gram-positive bacterium. A shot of penicillin will be okay. Marine Vibrio vulnificus is a gram-negative bacterium. There is no symptomatic drug for it, so we can only rely on treatment. It's such a small place under a microscope that you can't point with your hands, and you can't point with a stick, you can't even take a photo, print it, and circle it. It would be nice if I could die bacteria alone, die. By the way, the mage trick. Gretel's eyes lit up. Through the eyepiece, he stared at the Vibrio vulnificus under the mirror, and quietly mobilized the spell model. Dying. Well, the entire field of vision was dyed in a striking bright red, and it looked like the lens was dripping with blood. Forget it, cancel it. Die again. No progress, cancel, die again. After going back and forth for 17 or 18 times, I finally succeeded in defining the dying area in a small area. Then he gave up and looked at Elder Irwin for help, pointing to the microscope. It's the one in the middle, the rest is up to you. Would you like to try it yourself first? Elder Irwin frowned. The microscopic examination was completed and the relevant bacteria were identified. Why didn't Greet do it yet? If when dysentery swept through Heartland City, Gretel was just a priest apprentice and was not strong enough to learn the targeted killing technique of bacteria. Then now that he is a 6th level priest, why can't he still do it? Gretel was also confused. He tried more than once and failed every time. Whether you use bacteria isolated from patients, or you culture your own bacteria, whether you use bacteria seen under a microscope, or you use a sterile ring to pick up bacterial colonies, and then apply them on your fingertips. In short, no matter what, the directional sterilization technique he released couldn't kill the bacteria. Coming back this time, the know-how of directional sterilization is also one of the things Greet wants to learn. It's a pity that now is not the time. The patient is the first priority, so Elder Irwin has no choice but to roll up his sleeves. The old man observed the microscope carefully for a while, exhaled slowly, and then put his hand on the patient. Light green light emerged from his palm and continued to flow along Rita's body. After a while, the elder let go of his hand and nodded to Gretel. That's it? Then blood was taken from the patient and cultured. The same culture medium was repeated several times, but the desired bacteria could not be cultured. That marine Vibrio vulnificus has been completely killed. Targeted sterilization is really powerful. Gretel sighed silently, returned to his original position, and continued to guide the magic. Green vines grew from his hands, burrowing into the patient's wounds and deep into the blood vessels. Up, up, until it touches the bright red blood flow, and then pull back a little. Inject the holy water, ASP irate, inject again, ASP irate again, thoroughly clean the blood vessels to ensure that they are free of pus and dead tissue. On the wound base that has been completely debrided, red-colored, fresh granulations slowly grow under the treatment. In the blink of an eye, a length grows, in the blink of an eye, another length grows. Well, under the treatment, the growth rate is fast, there is no exudation from the wound, no wound infection, and no need for negative pressure drainage. Of course, there is no need to wait for it to heal slowly. How much trouble has been saved? In the previous life, it would have taken at least half a month to change dressings on such a wound. Greet recalled the days and nights spent changing dressings for diabetic foot patients, sighed, and gave the treatment a thumbs up with satisfaction. Seeing that the granulation in front of me had grown to the level of the skin edge, I quickly stopped the treatment and started to generate a skin flap. The edges of the pale dead skin were removed, and the new skin climbed up along the bright red granulation. Cover the back of the palm, cover the center of the palm, cover the fingers. Little by little, the broken right hand with visible bones turned into a bright red right hand that looked like it had been skinned, and then turned into a complete right hand. The skin on the hands is smooth and soft, without any calluses, and no trace of wind, frost, and labor can be seen. Reapply remove disease to help the body metabolize toxins produced by marine Vibrio vulnificus and protect patients from death due to multiple organ failure. After the magic, take your temperature again. Very good, my body temperature has returned to normal and I am basically cured. After the general anesthesia was lifted, the woman sat up from the operating table, holding an intact and smooth hand, with tears streaming down her face. Suddenly, she turned over like crazy and got off the stage, rushed out of the operating room, raised her right hand high. Old man. Did you see it? My hand is saved. It's saved. It's saved. Gretel stood at the door of the operating room, looking at the couple holding their heads and crying, and smiled slightly. Then, he quietly left and walked into the busy crowd of free clinics again. This is the wrong position to listen to heart sounds, you need to go up a little higher. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. 37.3 degrees, I continue to have a low fever, I may not be able to get more if I push it up tomorrow, I'll try my best. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Giolan 2020. Chapter 589. Another busy day passed, and Gretel returned to the consulting room with tired steps, and collapsed at the table on the spot. After the necrotizing fasciitis surgery on his right hand, although there was no major surgery on this day, it did not mean that he would have time to rest next. See X-rays, read electrocardiograms, do B ultrasounds. Just instructing the priests in Heartland City made Greed talk dry and almost broke his leg. After the free clinic was over, the priests went back to their homes and looked for their mothers. No, when praying to their respective gods, Greed also had to receive special training. Here, try the magical sterilization again, let me see, why can't you still do it? Greed was also puzzled. In terms of targeted killing, he can already use the parasite's body and eggs to directly target all forms of the parasite and kill it all over the body. In terms of microscopic locking, he can also brainstorm the molecular formula of urea or the atomic weight and characteristics of cadmium to perform targeted detoxification. The two are combined into one, magical sterilization, magical directional expulsion of certain bacteria, Shouldn't it be impossible? Gretel stared blankly at the rabbit in front of him. On the rabbit's legs, the gray-yellow hair was shaved clean, and a piece of skin was scratched, and a layer of culture medium was applied on it, a layer of Staphylococcus aureus that had just been selectively bred before. Gretel knew that if the sterilization was not successful, these Staphylococcus aureus bacteria would enter the rabbit's body along with the blood, multiply wildly, secrete toxins, and eventually cause it to fall into high fever and die of multiple organ failure. But he pressed his fingers to the rabbit's forehead. The rabbit shook his head, his long ears moved and brushed against the back of his hand. Gretel closed his eyes slightly and recalled carefully in his heart. Staphylococcus aureus, gram-positive, spherical, about 1 μm in diameter, arranged in grape clusters, no spores, no flagella. The genus Staphylococcus is currently divided into 40 species and 24 subspecies. Highly sensitive to penicillin, chlortetracycline, gentamicin, and erythromycin, and prone to develop drug resistance. Greet's fingertips, the light of the healing technique fell gently, sweeping from the top of the rabbit's head to its toes. Elder Irwin sat next to him, felt the rabbit's condition, and shook his head in disappointment. It still doesn't work. Where are you stuck? Isn't it what you said, Staphylococcus aureus? You cultivated it yourself and saw it under a microscope. Why can't you kill it? But, this is not necessarily true. Greet shook his head blankly. Elder Irwin was shocked on the spot. Why doesn't it have to be the case? You said it yourself. But that is a simple definition given for beginners to remember easily. If we really dig deeper, what grows together with Staphylococcus aureus may be other different species of the same genus. Direct smear microscopy of the specimen can only make a preliminary diagnosis based on the bacterial morphology, arrangement, and staining characteristics. What's more, he hasn't even produced the ammonium oxalate crystal violet used for gram staining yet, and he still dyes it with other pigments casually. Whether this thing is gram-positive or not, he judges based on experience. With this level of knowledge, how could he ensure that the targeted killing technique would definitely target Staphylococcus aureus? A microscope with a magnification of 1000 times can only see small dots of 1 mm in size, clustered together in groups. The capsule, cytoplasm, and spores are not clear at all. What if I kill the wrong person? What if we kill other harmless or even beneficial bacteria? There are many flora in the human body. If you kill them randomly, it will interfere with the flora in the body and cause problems. Greet shook his head silently, not knowing how to explain it to the teacher. The key is, how to explain the source of this knowledge. It's not like I made it one petri dish after another, one rabbit after another. There is no experiment and no evidence. How can we continue to rely on the divine revelation of the God of nature? What a joke. Elder Irwin looked at Greet's expression, his thick eyebrows gradually furrowed. After a long time, he sighed and rubbed his eyebrows. Little Greet, there are some things you don't want to say, so the teacher won't ask. However, the teacher understands why you can't kill bacteria. You don't have confidence in yourself, right? Greet nodded silently. I really have no confidence. The more I learn and know, the less I have confidence. Elder Irwin shook his head. During that plague, when I killed the dysentery bacillus you mentioned, I wasn't very confident. After all, it was a new thing, a gadget made by a priest's apprentice. And this is the first time that the causative factors have been pushed to the micro level. In that case, the probability of Elder Irwin not believing him is actually much higher than believing him. But, what if this is the right thing to do? What if it really works? Wouldn't it be possible to save so many people? That's what I thought at the time. I gave it a try, and it worked. Greet sat up straight, his face gradually becoming serious. In fact, the same goes for doctors. Surgeons and physicians often fumble their way forward when facing patients and diseases. Maybe this antibiotic will help, maybe cutting this piece off will help, maybe. I have told you before that the so-called magic is actually the power of the soul, the power of belief. You believe in this power and you hope that this power will work, which is the beginning of its interference with reality. So idealistic? Belief and hope are the beginning of everything? Gretel always thought that spiritual power, which should also be a kind of energy, was used to pull the energy of the material world and affect reality. But okay, the fundamental working mechanism of magic and divine magic has not been solved yet. Public opinion is reasonable, mother-in-law is reasonable. So, if your loved one is infected, wouldn't you try hard? Elder Irwin changed his tone, his eyes were dark, his tone was deep, and he seemed to have an echo of his own. Gretel stared into his eyes, and unconsciously, her thoughts were wandering. Yes, what if someone is infected with certain bacteria that cannot be cured by existing treatments? What if these bacteria cannot be cured by antibiotics? Apart from anything else, if Staphylococcus aureus continues to mutate and methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, MRSA, emerges. Even in order to prevent the misuse of antibiotics and prevent the rapid iteration of Staphylococcus aureus, it is best to learn the targeted killing magic as soon as possible. Try again. With a snap, Elder Irwin waved his hand and slapped Gretel hard on the back of the head. At the same time, he gathered his mental strength and shouted. Right now? Yes. Greet responded subconsciously. He turned his head slightly and glanced at the remaining yellow colonies on the petri dish. White light bloomed on his fingertip. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 590. Having learned the directional sterilization technique, Gretel has completed more than half of his mission in Nevis. Next, free clinics and medical teaching work are proceeding in an orderly manner. After more than half a month, the results are remarkable. The natural god cult, the god of war temple, and the fountain temple each have at least one group of people who have learned all the spells of the Greek cult. The correct cross-matching and blood transfusion methods, at least in the Ares temple, are already mastered by 3 to 5 priests. At least I have memorized all the correct usage of penicillin, dosage, skin test method, etc. Well, the next trip is to stay for a month, review little Avril, and wait for Brother Raymond's wife to give birth. Speaking of this, Greet wanted to do a prenatal checkup for pregnant women several times, but was blocked. Listen to fetal heartbeat. Should the chest piece of the stethoscope be attached directly to the belly of a pregnant woman? No. Do a B ultrasound? Should hands directly touch the belly skin of pregnant women? Dream. Further prenatal check UPS, well, Greet didn't dare to mention it. So, until the day of delivery, Gretel could only stay outside the delivery room, wandering around. There were figures shaking on the window, the midwife, and Eileen, the mother of the mother, and the female priest Joanna who came to help, all busy inside. The screams in the delivery room were long and short, and they sounded from early morning to evening, and from evening to midnight. Pots of blood poured out the door, which was shocking. Sarah walked back and forth at the door, and the ground was almost thinned by her. Every time she brought out a basin of blood, she would pull Gretel and ask, "Why haven't you given birth yet? It won't be a problem, right? Greet, is the mother okay?" It's okay, Greet kept comforting her. While comforting me, I recited silently in my heart. For first-time mothers, the latent period should not exceed 20 hours, the active period should not exceed 6 hours, for the second stage of labor, if epidural anesthesia is not performed, for first-time mothers, the longest period should not exceed 3 hours, a total of 29 hours, it's still early, still early, still early. Hell, he couldn't see anything from across the room, and no one answered when he asked about the situation, so he couldn't help at all. And his energy can only be expended on the maternal family members. Little Avril, stop running around. Edward, David, watch your sister. Brother Raymond, don't worry, there are healers here, everything will be fine. Alas, the world's acceptance of male obstetricians and gynecologists is still a little too low. However, I still hope that the delivery process goes smoothly and Brother Raymond's wife, mother, and son are safe. Greet began to pray for an unknown number of times. However, contrary to expectations, a sharp scream suddenly sounded in the delivery room, followed by an exclamation. "Ah! What's wrong?" Greet asked loudly through the window. In the room, Joanna's voice trembled. "A lot of blood, a lot of blood, the child hasn't even revealed her head yet, a lot of blood, she is dying." Outside the delivery room, everyone waiting for the news was shocked at the same time. The mother's brother roared, rushed directly to the delivery room, bumped into Joanna who was pushing the door out, and was pushed out on the spot. The mother's father and Captain Cullen were standing side by side, each with a pipe, smoking until his face was blurred. At this time, the cigarette holder snapped with a click. Raymond's lips trembled. He wanted to say something but couldn't. After a while, a trombone sounded and he threw himself on the window and shook the pane vigorously. "Flora! Flora! Hold on! Hold on!" Sarala couldn't help but rushed in. The white light of the healing spell in her hand flashed, and she threw it at the pregnant women one by one. After a moment, he raised his voice and exclaimed, "No! Gretel, the bleeding can't be stopped. Can I come in and take a look?" Gretel's heart skipped a beat and he raised his voice. Without waiting for an answer, he turned around and grabbed Brother Raymond and dragged him to the mother's father. "Can I go in and take a look? I might be able to help. Let me in." The old man's hair was messy and his eyes were red. "I stayed up from early morning to midnight, and my expression was already quite sluggish, with thick eye mucus accumulating in the corners of my eyes." Obviously, he is not unconcerned about his daughter's safety. However, when asked by Gretel, his answer was still, "No. You are a man. You go in. Please." Raymond interrupted decisively. He grabbed Greet's wrist with his backhand and pushed him into the room. As he pushed, he turned back and shouted, "Flora is my wife. I don't care." With that said, he kicked open the wooden door and pushed Gretel in hard. And Eileen hurried over to chase people away. Raymond grabbed the door frame with one hand, stuck half of his body in the door, and shouted inside, "Gretel! Please save her. You can use any means, no matter what you do. I don't care. As long as you save her. Save her." "No." Greet was pushed unsteadily by him and stumbled to the mother's bed. Staggering, he simply knelt down and slapped 2 cleansing techniques on his hands. With a glance, oops. You don't even need to look at the amount of bleeding below, just by the look on the mother's face and the smell of blood on her face, you can tell that the mother is in hemorrhagic shock. Greet quickly slapped down a blood test magic. After taking a look, he shouted through the window, "The mother has type of blood. She has type of blood. Call someone. Call as many people as possible. At least 20 of them, all of them type A. I need someone to give her a blood transfusion. MD." Fortunately, all the soldiers in the city guard had their blood types tested. Otherwise, where would I find so many blood donors in the middle of the night? 400 ml for one person, 8,000 ml for 20 people, this number is not too much, it can only be said to be prepared. Greet rotated in the obstetrics department and saw the largest amount of blood transfusion ever, a total of 10,000 milliliters. The blood was flowing down the operating table like a waterfall. After the operation, the surgeon, assistants, and nurses all had their feet standing in blood. These should all be prepared before delivery. Prenatal checkup, blood preparation. Until now, it doesn't matter what you want, he has to come to you at short notice. Cirella. Don't stop the treatment. Keep her alive. Joanna. Get ready to cross-match the blood. I'll check on the mother. As he spoke, he quickly opened the sheets, took out a bottle of glycerin, and poured it down. The transparent and viscous liquid flowed down in all directions around her navel. Greet immediately pressed her fingers and activated the B ultrasound magic. I wipe it. Placenta previa. Even if it is not the most dangerous form of complete previa and the placenta with the richest blood volume, it is still very scary if it is blocking the path of fetal delivery. This is equivalent to saying that if the fetus wants to be delivered, it must rub all the way across the placenta and make a hole of at least 10 centimeters. In this case, only if you can give birth safely will you have ghosts, and only if you don't bleed heavily will you have ghosts. There is no prenatal checkup, no cesarean section, and giving birth is really a lifelong struggle. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Still 37.2. It seems that the Narcissus buds that popped up did not bring me good luck. I can't update during the push, I'm really sorry. Thanks to @Isimer1 for tipping 100 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 591. Sirara had never seen Greet move so fast. He fluttered his hands and recited the incantation softly, and the magic light fell one after another. Brush, soothing technique, to stop maternal pain. Brush, ECG, brush, blood oxygen monitoring, two-sided light screen unfolds. Brush, brush, a pair of floating discs appeared under the mother's body, built into a temporary operating table, and then floated upward at the same time, rising to the appropriate height, and then racing against time to connect to the invasive blood pressure monitor. Then he pointed to the side, and the silent phantom was like a dragon and a snake, quickly outlining the scene inside the mother's body in the void: fetus, amniotic fluid, umbilical cord, placenta, birth canal. Gretel pointed at the image in the sky and said in a quick voice, Cirilla, look. Here is the placenta, blocking the way for the baby to come out, and it has been bleeding profusely. Come over, stand between the mother's legs, and use the magic to stop the placenta. Remember, every time the uterus contracts, the placenta will bleeding. It's up to you to stop the bleeding and save your life. His voice was stern and decisive. Normally, he would speak softly to Cirilla, but at this moment, his speaking speed was more than twice as fast, and every word was a command. Without saying a word, Cirilla hurried over and knelt down on one knee. Gretel ordered, while shaking his hands. The scarf unfolded and spread on the mother's body, revealing only the high bulge of the abdomen. With a wave of his left hand, he used the cleansing technique to wash away the glycerin. His right hand was already holding an alcohol cotton ball and wiping it quickly. The touch under my hand was swelling and hardening, and the contractions had begun. General anesthesia can prevent the mother from feeling pain, but it cannot stop the involuntary muscle movement. This is also normal. Otherwise, if the heartbeat and breathing stop at the same time, the so-called general anesthesia magic will become a death magic. But similarly, the operation of respiratory muscles cannot be stopped, the peristalsis of the intestines cannot be stopped, and uterine contractions cannot be stopped. Every contraction will push the fetus downward, causing a large amount of blood from the placenta to gush out. Cirilla. Stop the bleeding. New. White light flashed, and Cirilla knelt under the scarf and answered without raising her head. The light of the healing technique shone through the scarf. Gretel stared at the electrocardiogram and blood oximeter. He quickly sterilized his hand. When the contraction stopped, he immediately cut it with a knife. Take time. Get speed. Between two contractions, the longest interval is 5 to 6 minutes, and the shortest is only 1 to 2 minutes. Within these 2 minutes, cut, pull to both sides, cut again, pull the hook again. It is necessary to incise the skin, subcutaneous fat, anterior rectus sheath, muscle layer, peritoneum, uterine serosa layer, uterine muscle layer, and uterine mucosa layer, a total of 8 layers. Try to take out the fetus before the next contraction to avoid another placental bleeding. Greet concentrated on it and increased his hand speed to the extreme. The right hand holds the sword, and the left hand guides the mage's hand, working together. Cut it down with a knife, throw out 2 magician hands, and pull them apart symmetrically, cut it down again, throw out 2 magician hands, and pull them apart symmetrically. And Eileen and the midwife huddled aside, covering their mouths tightly, not daring to say a word. While Joanna was busy, she quickly took a look at the scene, and her eyes suddenly straightened. She had never seen a spell cast so quickly. The speed is extremely fast, but it is not chaotic at all. Just like the best warriors demonstrating their moves, each move is breathtakingly fast, but it is still clear and distinct. Within 1 minute, 8 sets of operations and 8 spell castings. Cyrilla. Attract. Another shout. Miss Yinlong responded without raising her head, and saw a vine appearing out of thin air and inserting into her abdominal cavity. At the end of the vine, a high-speed whirlwind emerged out of thin air, sucking up all the amniotic fluid. Then, the mage's hand continued to pull outward. Before the blood transfusion people from outside arrived, a large 10 centimeters gash was already opened in the mother's abdomen. Greet stretched out his left hand, and the green vine stretched out of thin air and penetrated directly. In a moment, the thin vines were like a soft silk garment, wrapping the baby in all directions, and silently squeezed the head out from the incision. This is pretty good, the pressure is even in all directions, and it is not easy to damage the fetus, and the vines are thin and soft, and can get into the smallest gaps, which is much better than forceps. Greet even had time to think like this. The force of countless vines was fed back to the bottom of his heart, and then adjustments were made according to his consciousness. Head, shoulders, hands, body. Come out, come out. The atmosphere in the delivery room suddenly became lively. Greet closed her eyes slightly, manipulated the vines to take out the baby, turned it around and put it into the midwife's hands. No matter how busy he was over there, he opened his eyes, glanced at the reading of the invasive blood pressure monitor, and shouted loudly. Blood. When will the blood come? I'm going to get the blood. There was a clutter of footsteps outside, and the mother's husband and father knocked on the door and called, obviously getting an answer. The city guard soldiers walked out of their homes one by one and lined up outside. Joanna ran out quickly, and soon ran in holding a bottle. Greet has spawned vines here, connected them to needles, and pierced the other end into the blood bottle. Blood gurgled into the mother's veins. Gretel glanced at the electrocardiogram and blood pressure monitor readings and breathed a sigh of relief. If the blood supply comes in time, everything should be fine. Next, comes the last task. Let the mother safely deliver the placenta, clean it, and close the abdomen. In the previous life, oxytocin or ergometrine should be injected at this time to cause the uterus to contract rapidly and compress the blood vessels near the placenta to avoid heavy bleeding. But Gretel looked around and saw that he didn't even know where to find ergot, let alone ergometrine. Just rely on healing skills. Gretel cheered up and flew out 2 more mage hands. Pull gently to remove the umbilical cord, placenta, and fetal membranes. The placenta and the uterine wall were completely open. With a slight movement, blood quickly poured out, staining the surgical field red. How much was the bleeding? If you leave it alone, 400 ml? 800 ml? 1000 ml? Without thinking, Gretel relied on his memory and frantically threw healing spells down. The white light flashes against the uterine wall, healing, 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 healing. I don't care what your situation is, whether you want to shrink in the future or not, in short, let me heal all the wounds you have now. The electrocardiogram cloud screen alarmed like crazy. Blood pressure monitor. Gretel only hates that the blood pressure monitor is not connected to the alarm function. However, if it is really connected, his current blood pressure may be over 200. Like a forceful cut of flesh and blood, the placenta was separated from the mother's body bit by bit, and the treatment techniques were applied against the clock. It took a long time before an umbilical cord was pulled out, connected to the placenta and fetal membranes, and dropped into the copper basin on the side. Holy water. Cleanse with holy water. Hurry. The pale golden holy water was poured down without hesitation. The wounds that were not taken care of by the last bit of healing also condensed, shrank, and disappeared under the cleansing of the holy water. Greet swayed and took a step back, almost falling. Sarala, I'm dizzy, close my abdomen layer by layer. You come, I said, you do it? Greet murmured amid the baby's loud cries. Please subscribe, ask for monthly tickets, ask for recommendation votes, ask for book reviews, ask for all kinds of. Thanks to Ed who loves to eat cauliflower for children and gave me 500 starting coins.